Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this Decoding webinar on AAM. Mentioning the housekeeping items briefly, the presentation slides are available to download in the material tabs. This can be found at the top right as a PDF. And also there will be time for question and answers. If you can please log your questions in the question box. I would hand it over to Aaron to start the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you everyone for choosing to spend some time with me today. I will be talking about advanced air mobility, scalability, how to decode potential and prerequisites. So before we dive in, a little bit about myself. I am Aaron Organ, your presenter today. So a little bit about me. I was able to start working in the industry of aviation at a pretty young age for a company that manufactured aircraft parts. And in addition to that, they would restore classic aircraft or vintage aircraft. And so I was able to get a lot of hands-on experience in aviation. And after about 8 years with this company, I decided that I didn't want to turn wrenches for the rest of my life. And so I went to college and got a bachelor's in aviation management. From there, I went to work for the American Association of Airport Executives on their training team. So we were able to deliver training solutions of various kinds to airports across the United States. And that was a lot of fun. I then earned my master's degree in transportation systems from Cranfield University in the United Kingdom, and then went into academics. And I was teaching courses, aviation classes for both crewed and uncrewed aviation. After a few years of teaching, I joined WSP about 2 years ago. And here I get to participate in a lot of cool different projects related to uncrewed aircraft systems and advanced air mobility and all things aerial innovation. So I'm also an active pilot and I enjoy sharing my passion for aviation with my wife and two daughters. So that's a little bit about me. Now a little bit more about WSP. So I mentioned aerial innovation. I'm on the aerial innovation team, which is housed within that larger US Aviation Services group. There's some graphics here on this slide that kind of show the broad variety of services that we offer to airports across the United States. On the aerial innovation team, we are focused on projects related to advanced air mobility and uncrewed aircraft systems. But like I said, all things aerial innovation. So we do a lot of research and apply innovative or emerging technologies as solutions to various problems throughout aviation. So with that context, we're gonna kind of lay out what this presentation will be on. So we're gonna first talk about what is advanced air mobility, those AAM prerequisites, how to plan for AAM, who should be involved with those planning efforts. We're going to talk about how to evaluate yourself as an organization and some things to consider when it comes to that. I'll highlight that through an example of a project we did through ACRP Research Report 243. And then at the end, as was mentioned, we'll have time for question and answers. So let's go ahead and dive in with what is advanced air mobility. Some of you may have heard that term, but don't fully recognize what it means. Or there's people throughout the industry that use this term in a variety of ways. So I want to offer clarity of how I will use this term today. So advanced air mobility, or AAM, is really an umbrella term that was introduced about 4 years ago by NASA. And it's really an inclusive term of various emerging technologies. So things like improved battery technology or electric distributed propulsion, increased levels of autonomy. These types of technologies that are advancing and maturing are enabling aircraft to move people and cargo in new ways, or to serve them in new markets or historically underserved markets. So this term AAM is inclusive of other terms that you may have heard, such as urban air mobility or UAM, regional air mobility, and uncrewed aircraft systems for cargo delivery, package delivery, things of that nature. So again, I wanted to clarify that today, as I go throughout my presentation, I will be using this term in this umbrella inclusive term way. It's going to be inclusive of a variety of use cases, really. And so I decided to highlight some of those use cases using this NASA graphic. As you start to look around this graphic, you can see there's different types of aircraft and different technology being used to enable some of these new use cases. Things like UAS package delivery, or using electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft or aerial taxis in an urban environment, or also in a regional environment. uh, doing air ambulance or other emergency response use cases as well. So again, as I go throughout my presentation and we talk about different planning principles for AAM, keep in mind all of these different use cases. So with that, kind of diving into prerequisites for advanced air mobility, I want to start on that broader scale, how there really are a lot of different prerequisites for this all to become a reality. Things like aircraft certification, or developing an operational framework to adopt these emerging technologies. Here in the United States, where I am based, we have the Federal Aviation Administration, which has been releasing documents over the last several years that are pieces to the puzzle for that operational framework. Things like infrastructure development. What existing infrastructure do we have? How may it need to be retrofitted, or what new infrastructure needs to be developed? The regulatory compliance piece. Again, the FAA has been releasing different pieces and parts of that. They're going through rulemaking processes to come up with new regulation or edit existing regulations. And we as an industry will need to figure out how to comply with these new regulations. An example of that is like pilot and operator training. There is an increased levels of autonomy in these aircraft. Many of the manufacturers of these new aircraft have capabilities to be fully autonomous. And so that technology integration and how that relates to a pilot or an operator, new rules around training and operation will need to be developed for that. And things like community engagement. So I've been in this space long enough to know that as you dive into any one of these topics, it's going to unfold a lot of questions that would need to be answered, a lot of obstacles to be overcome. And so really an overarching prerequisite for each and every one of these is planning. So talking about planning, I want to talk about who should plan for AAM. Um, Really, any one of those use cases that we mentioned at the beginning, it's going to require a lot of collaboration and cooperation between various organizations to actually be successfully implemented. And so today I'm going to be focusing on overarching planning principles and considerations that can be applied across various organizations. So whether you're part of a state department of transportation or have a standalone division of aeronautics, or perhaps you're part of an MPO or a metropolitan planning organization. Maybe you work for a city and are planning different transportation initiatives for the city, or perhaps you work for an airport. Right, all of these stakeholders will need to work together and all individually plan for AAM. So I'm going to spend a fair amount of time on this one slide. We're going to talk about each one of these, but first, um, when it comes to planning for AM and how to approach that, I want to kind of offer a disclaimer. The fact that each city, each state, each country, each airport, they're going to have their own unique circumstances. And this isn't really a one size fits all solution. Rather, it's a planning framework that can be customized to meet the nuances that are going to be found in each situation. This planning framework will really help enable that scalability, right? Back to the title of this presentation. You'll see as I go through these, they're kind of like building blocks. And they can happen in various orders, again, kind of customizable, but it's really going to enable that scaling of planning efforts, which in turn will scale the implementation efforts for various use cases. And it's really about starting small and growing from there. So I'm going to go ahead and talk through each of these points briefly. Starting there at the top left, organization evaluation. This is one that I will spend a little bit more time on in the next few slides, but this is that self-assessment as an organization of how aware are you of advanced air mobility and how prepared are you to help adopt those technologies. The next one, use case analysis. Again, this theme that every place, whether airport or city or region, is going to be different. They'll have different needs. And so some use cases, maybe drone package delivery for medical supplies is something that's really needed and can really help people in that area. Or perhaps it's just not going to work in that area for different geographical reasons or whatever it may be. So you really have to analyze the various use cases and what you can apply in your area that's going to best benefit your constituents. Things like infrastructure analysis, right? Once you've identified those use cases, you really start to pick through, well, what infrastructure is needed to support our identified use cases, right? What existing infrastructure do we have? What may need to be developed? And not just the obvious ones like where should we put a vertiport, but those secondary infrastructure pieces as well. Things like weather sensors for micro weather reporting and things of that nature as well. This really kind of leads into the next two, a resource study, a gap analysis. What I mean here is, again, look internally as an organization and identify what resources do we have, what workforce or funding do we have to dedicate towards these efforts. Um, Also, there will be collaboration with other stakeholders. So can you pull resources together? Maybe an airport you're working with has resources that you might not have, or vice versa. And then an overall gap analysis of what is missing, what is needed to enable this. As you kind of do these initial steps, it builds into really starting to develop an ecosystem roadmap for what advanced air mobility can look like in your area. And that kind of starts to unfold these other steps on the right-hand side, looking at the existing policies that are in place on a city level, a state level, a regional level, and what might need to be developed to adopt these technologies. That really starts to get into more localized planning efforts, things like when you're looking at land use, what is compatible, how is this zoned, do we need to make changes here or not? Things of that nature. And this last one is really important, equity and environmental justice analysis. So, advanced air mobility, electric aircraft, these emerging technologies, they hold a promise to have cleaner, better, more sustainable aviation. But there are still negative externalities, and we need to be honest about those and plan properly for those. And so engaging throughout the process really in equity and environmental justice analysis is really important and a key piece. So with that, as promised, I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this organization assessment or evaluation. Some of the things that I mean by that is, as an organization, you can look at things like your overall culture. Is there a cultural tendency towards innovation, towards being an early adopter of new technology? What about AAM specifically? What is the attitude towards that? Do you have leadership support behind planning for advanced air mobility? And often we see with various clients, is there a level of internal or external political pressure on looking at these technologies? Looking inward and identifying the capabilities that your organization has. Again, is there funding or workforce that can be dedicated to these planning initiatives? Or will you need to hire outside help, contractors, consultants, things of that nature? And what does that look like for procurement purposes? And then information on the position, your general position as an organization. What I mean here is, what is your relationship with other stakeholders of interest? Um, Again, what resources do you have versus what they have, and how can you work together in this space? So I want to offer up kind of an example of how to do a self-evaluation through a project that WSP did, that we did for the Airport Cooperative Research Program, or ACRP. And because we have an international audience joining us today, I wanted to take a moment to explain what is ACRP. So to do that, I'm going to kind of walk through this flow chart. Here in the United States, we have the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, a great large organization that looks at various things. And so they are broken down or organized into what are called program divisions. One of those is the Transportation Research Board. So the Transportation Research Board looks at all modes of transportation. They have an annual conference every year in January in DC. If you've never been, I highly encourage you trying to attend. I mean, there's 15,000 transportation experts gathering together, and it's a really great conference. So as part of the Transportation Research Board, they have cooperative research programs, one of which is the Airport Cooperative Research Program, or ACRP. So WSP was hired by ACRP to do um, this research project that resulted in Research Report 243. And along with this research report, WSP developed different resources and tools that can be used. And so one of those tools that I want to talk about is this evaluation or assessment that can be done. So there is, as Sharon mentioned, resources along with this presentation in the handouts box. One of the links will take you to this page, basically, and you can download uh, the research report itself in its entirety for free as a PDF. And then the second arrow is pointing to the link that you would download the UAM Airport Assessment Toolkit to your computer. And once you get it downloaded and open it up, I'm going to walk through what this is. So this is a tool that we developed um, to help airports do kind of a self-evaluation or an organizational evaluation of their overall awareness and readiness for advanced air mobility. So this is kind of the landing page of that assessment. You're gonna, as an airport, pick which classification you are. Here in the United States, using the FAA definitions, hub is going to be inclusive of large hub, medium hub, and small hub airports. Or maybe you're a reliever general aviation airport in an urban environment or suburban environment, or perhaps a GA airport in a rural environment. And the instructions on the left kind of walks through that you're going to be evaluated via various questions or assessments. And then at the end, it will give you a level readiness score of no go, not now, slow go, or go now, which I'll talk about each of these in a little bit more depth. So as you start the evaluation, once you kind of pick which airport category you are, there's going to be those three main categories I talked about: awareness, and then readiness, and then infrastructure. And you're going to be answering various questions and identifying your own level for each question. So each question has three level descriptions: level 1, 2, and 3, and it will describe what each of those levels looks like or feels like. And there's also references back to that guidebook or that research report for more information on each of these. So as you go through and take this assessment, which we've seen airports use this tool in a variety of ways, right? As an individual that works at an airport, you could take this assessment, or if you have an AAM planning committee of multiple individuals at an airport, you could take this all together in a room together and kind of debate each question and decide which level you kind of all agree on, where's the consensus. Or you could have multiple people take it individually and then look at the collective results. But it really can help guide overarching conversations. And as mentioned, it will result in the end, once you complete the entire assessment, a readiness score across those four levels. And so, for example, this one scored a level 2, not now. And it's going to provide additional information of why you scored in that category, potential action items for how you can increase your overall maturity level for integrating AAM. And so what are some of those next steps? This assessment could be taken multiple times, and we recommend that it is taken multiple times throughout kind of the planning process as things change, as your maturity level increases. You can use this as a tool to reassess yourselves. It can be modified if needed. So um, again, this is just an example of how an organization can perform that self-evaluation piece. This is that airport example through ACRP Research Report 243, but WSP, we developed this evaluation based on a robust methodology known as the capability maturity modeling. And this is something that's been around since the 1980s, and we can really customize and do this across various topics and for any organization. So some other tools and services that we offer in this space is doing that advanced air mobility technology analysis, right? How mature are these? Um, when can we expect them to come on board? How can they be integrated, right? Just an overall analysis of the technology itself. And that flows right into a use case analysis. Again, depending on your area, your situation, all the nuances that I mentioned earlier, what are the use cases that will best serve your people there, your constituents? So that capability maturity modeling that I talked about, that's really a robust way to do those evaluations of an organization. We can help with things like regulatory and policy analysis, whether that be, city code or state laws or whatever it may be. You can see some graphics on this slide on the right of various tools that we have internally that really empower us to do airspace and land use planning. And that all flows into starting to develop that ecosystem or roadmap for what this looks like for your area. We can help look at what are the supporting systems that are going to be needed to enable that roadmap. And then we often help with community engagement and getting to a phased integration. So you may have recognized that there's kind of a scale to these, kind of back to that planning framework that I mentioned. You can build a foundation as you go through these steps and really scale up your efforts for planning and implementation. So with that, hopefully this has been helpful, and there's some key takeaways here that really, to successfully scale any of these use cases that we talked about at the beginning that fit under this umbrella term, advanced air mobility, you're going to have to take a look at those prerequisites, planning being the biggest overlapping one. And that first step really is to evaluate yourself as an organization. a lot of the organizations have been planning for AAM for a number of years now. And so perhaps it's time to reevaluate your position and adjust your roadmap if needed. And then really begin analyzing the use cases that are going to serve your people best. We want advanced air mobility to enrich people's lives, to augment existing transportation systems, not replace, right? But to augment and really scale it in a way that will help serve people. So with that, if you want to learn more about this topic, you can check out a publication that we just released on this very topic. This one is specifically about vertiport automation systems and how that can really scale up urban air mobility. And so I encourage you to take a look at that. That's also included in the links that are being provided. So with that, I am happy to take any questions that we might have.
Thank you, Aaron. Fantastic presentation. Just mentioning the housekeeping items before we move to the Q&A session. The presentation slides are available to download in the handout box in the Materials tab. There are all the links that Aaron mentioned. And also, please continue to log your questions in the question box. I will start with the first question. At what point can we see the use of AAM being integrated into commercial travel?
Yeah, this is a great question that we often get because dates, to be honest, dates have been sliding back with different manufacturers for eVTOLs, for example. Those aircraft certification launch dates have kind of slid over time. So right now they're saying that certification is expected for many of these in 2025, which we would see initial operations in 2026 and then some growth from there. But there are other companies taking a different approach. For example, going after STCs or supplemental type certificates on already certified aircraft airframes. For example, taking the Cessna Caravan and turning that into an electric Cessna Caravan or an autonomous Cessna Caravan. Um, and then we have drone package delivery happening now, right? Like companies like Zipline have been building out robust drone package delivery networks throughout the globe. Um, we have it happening here in the United States in various locations. So it depends what we're talking about when it comes to advanced air mobility. Again, I use that as an umbrella term. So some use cases are a reality now. We see it happening commercially now. But for the larger, regional and urban air travel with these different aircraft, hopefully we'll start to see it in the next year or two as they get certified is the key piece there.
Thank you. How do you envision integrating advanced air mobility operations into existing airport infrastructure, and what are the key challenges you anticipate in this process?
Um, great question. Thank you. So I gave that airport example through ACRP 243. And so really kind of building off my presentation, I think an initial step is to look at yourself as an organization. Is the airport forward leaning? Is there that leadership support or push or political push to look at this? And if there is, then I think an initial step would really be to start looking at your current ALP or airport layout plan and evaluating that planning process. How can you start evaluating what type of AAM operations would be appropriate at the airport? Because if you've seen one airport, you've only seen one airport is a great phrase we use in aviation all the time. So each airport is unique. Maybe it'll be cargo operations, or maybe it is more eVTOLs carrying people to the airport. And then once you've identified those use cases, you can start to dive through that planning framework that I talked about, right? Looking at, okay, where on the airport is most suitable for that use case? Um, what existing resources or infrastructure do we have, or what would need to be developed? A big one is, power supply, if charging will be necessary to support those. Things of that nature, I think, are first initial steps.
Thank you. Next question is about noise. What are the potential noise impacts? And the comment here is additional noise from this advanced air mobility adds to an already high noise environment in cities.
Yeah, great question, because this is something that we often hear. It's kind of a leading concern of a lot of folks, understandably so, right? Because what we kind of have to compare it to is traditional aviation, whether that's traditional fixed wing aircraft or helicopters, which are both very loud and noisy. And so there is, because of that electric propulsion piece, these aircraft are quieter, but there's absolutely still a noise component to this. And there's been a lot of noise studies being conducted and being done to understand that better. Um, so I think like a first step would be to just be honest about that it is still a negative externality of these aircraft. Um, and you spoke to like there's already high noise profiles in cities. So that's where it comes back to the importance of proper planning, because we can explore through various tools that we have, where is the city the loudest and what routing is best from point A to point B through various factors such as noise. And along with that, we can explore noise mitigation strategies for routing, for where the placement of infrastructure goes, where these aircraft are going to land and take off. All of that comes back to proper planning. So,
Thank you. Could you share with us any additional projects that WSP has regarding advanced air mobility?
yeah, absolutely. So our team, the aerial innovation team, we've been engaged in various ones. I highlighted the one today through ACRP. Another ACRP project was the 236 report on, again, for airports, how to prepare for electric aircraft and hydrogen technologies. The airport planning team also does a lot of those and helps airports, again, plan for how they can integrate advanced air mobility use cases at airports through traditional airport planning processes. We also have like our properties and buildings team that's heavily engaged with various clients, identifying real estate and infrastructure to support advanced air mobility, where vertiports should go, things of that nature. So also, because I use advanced air mobility as this umbrella term, the UAS side here in the United States, WSP has over 70 drone pilots, and we do various drone operations. And so, kind of building off of that, we're working with the Michigan DOT on a communications mesh project for enabling beyond visual line of sight operations for drone package delivery. Um, so those are some that come to mind. But yes, we have various project work in this space of advanced air mobility across multiple business lines. So it's really cool.
Thank you. I will take the last question. This is from the US regarding DOTs. So, what role do you
Hmm.
see State Department of Transportation playing in the overall implementation of advanced air mobility?
Great, thank you. So yeah, here for the international audience, here in the U.S., each state has a Department of Transportation that kind of oversees and regulates and manages the infrastructure, transportation infrastructure in that state. So what comes to mind for me, the role that a state DOT would be playing is really leading that regional planning effort, right? Because there's going to be multiple points in an ecosystem of advanced air mobility use cases in which there's going to need to be collaboration between multiple stakeholders. And I think the role that a state DOT can play is to really lead those efforts, to lead that collaboration between, cities and counties and the MPOs, the metropolitan planning organizations or regional planning organizations, and really just lead that ecosystem roadmap development for your state, right? And how, again, how can AAM augment and support and create more robust transportation systems to better serve your people? So I think that would be the main role that comes to mind.
Thank you, Aaron. Fantastic presentation. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. We hope to see you in our upcoming session. We have another session with the presenter, Aaron, in November. We hope to see you there. So thanks again, everyone. We will wrap up the session now.
Thank you so much, everyone.